Thank you, Presiding Officer. I am grateful for the opportunity to speak in this debate, and I would like to put on record my thanks to the committee and the clerks for producing this substantive piece of work. I have found it a very informative piece of work coming to as a non-committee member. However, before turning to the substance of the report, I would like very briefly to reflect on a previous jewel in Glasgow's architectural heritage that was lost to fire. This past Saturday marked 47 years since Glasgow lost St Andrew's Hall. Now, I don't think there's many people perhaps in this chamber who would be familiar with St Andrew's Hall, or even its history, but it was one of the premier music venues, not just in Scotland and the UK, but in Europe. It had legendary acoustics. It was home of the Scottish National Orchestra, and it hosted some of the greatest musicians of all time, from Dame Nellie Melba to Sergei Rachmaninoff, and it also hosted some of our most significant political figures, including David Lloyd George and Winston Churchill. Now, I raise this as it was lost to fire following a boxing match between Scotland and Romania. Smoking was prohibited. However, those working at the venue were lax in the rules. They did not want to tell boxing fans that they couldn't smoke. And as a consequence of that, a cigarette ignited material which burned the venue down. Now, the venue, only a facade remains today, but it stands as part of the Mitchell Library complex at Charing Cross. And the reason the Mitchell Library stands today intact is because of a firewall between St Andrew's Hall and the Mitchell Library that was put in place during the Second World War. And I raise that because it raises two questions about the application of rules and appropriate measures of mitigation, which have been raised within this piece of work. And it is tragic that some 42 years after that initial event, another jewel should be so severely damaged, and then following that, almost completely destroyed. And the fire at the art school, of course, came only 10 years after what was the Elgin Place Congregational Church, known to my generation as the Shack nightclub, was burned to the ground in Pitt Street. And it raises a question of how is it we have managed to find ourselves in a situation where these architectural gems, so interwoven with what it is to Glaswegian identity, should be lost? Why is it that these lessons over half a century have failed to be learned? A question arises that perhaps there's always going to be an inevitability that such tragedies can happen. But my reflections from reading this report is that the events that have befallen the School of Art in Glasgow were ultimately, to some degree, preventable. But when reading of regards to the conduct of many of those involved in the management and running of the art school, the report fills me with a foreboding sense as I make my way through it, because it seems that there was an inevitability in what eventually happened. And that is a great tragedy, because I asked myself, as someone who was born 23 years after the St Andrew's Hall burned down, what would it have been like to have been there in this incredible venue? And I wonder for people born today, 23 years from now, what they will ask. What would it have been like to visit the Macintosh building? I appreciate there are calls to rebuild. I think they are valid calls, and clearly I think I agree with the committee that this has to be done in consultation with both the local community and wider stakeholders. I think the point that Patrick Harvey raised about the need to build trust before encountering a crisis is a lesson for us all, but we certainly do have a job now to restore trust and to build trust. And I think a key way of doing that will be to have that thorough engagement and not to take any decisions preemptively on what the future of the site should be. I don't endorse the position that Adam Tompkins took, but I think the anger that he expressed is an anger that is visceral and reflects the anger of many of his constituents, and I can recognise that entirely. So I say it is imperative that there is a substantive process of engagement. So many of the contributions this afternoon have focused on the need to ask questions, and so much of this debate is ultimately contingent on and caveated by the need to wait for the outcome of the SFRS inquiry. And I think while it is frustrating that we do not have a report yet, what is most vitally important is that the SFRS and all involved have the opportunity to conduct a most full and robust inquiry so that we have a full understanding of the events that took place. I am very sympathetic to the calls for a full public inquiry. I think what would be most beneficial, however, is to wait until we have the full results of the inquiry from the SFRS before proceeding forward. But by whatever mechanism we achieve it, it is imperative that lessons are learned from the events of 2014 and 2018, and that we ensure that this never happens again, because while there may be some questions about who the future legal owner of the Macintosh building should be, the reality is that they belong to all of us and to future generations too, and we are duty-bound to protect them. Thank you.